exposing the propaganda and challenging you to use your brain. It's time to tap into the truth.
Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed time to tap into the truth. Welcome to tonight's broadcast. Hope you're having a great day wherever you are and whatever you may be doing. If you are fortunate enough to be listening live, this is, of course, December 18th, 2013. And if you're catching us on podcast, well, I can't tell you what the date is then. At any rate, big news going on today, things that are hard to explain, and some things that just need to be followed up on. And we'll start with a couple of stories that are just quick follow-ups, but they are important. Now, as you know, we've already talked about, to some degree, the young teenager who seems to be suffering from the very real psychological disorder known as affluenza. Bottom line is, the rich kid received no jail time because he was too spoiled to know any better. Well, it looks like the prosecutors are not quite done yet, so the teen in question may not be out of trouble just yet. Texas prosecutors are again trying to put a drunk driving teen behind bars after he received only 10 years probation for a June crash that killed 4 people and seriously injured 2 more. Now, according to NBC's DFW, Ethan Couch, 16, was given the 10-year probation and ordered to a ritzy hoity-toity rehabilitation clinic for alcoholism after pleading guilty to 4 counts of manslaughter. Now, the Tarrant District Attorney has sought the maximum penalty of 20 years in prison. There are, however, still 2 intoxication assault charges pending against Couch. The DA is seeking the maximum sentence in those cases, 3 years in a juvenile detention facility, from which Couch could not be released before his 19th birthday. Now, according to the Fort Wayne Star-Telegram, they're reporting that Judge Gene Boyd, who handed down the original watered-down punishment, may also give Couch no punishment on these charges. That, in fact, seems likely, as the judge did not sentence jail time for the more serious charges. Judge Boyd has faced considerable backlash following the ruling. In fact, there's even a petition on change.org for the judge's removal that has garnered more than 15,000 signatures as of this moment. Couch had a blood alcohol content 3 times the legal limit and had Valium in his bloodstream when he crashed his truck into several people who were helping a stalled car on the side of the road. His defense lawyers argued Couch could not be held responsible for the deaths because he suffered from a disorder where the rich and privileged are unable to comprehend the consequences of their actions. A disorder known as, well, at least since it was first coined in this case, affluenza, which is not recognized, of course, by the American Psychiatric Association as a legitimate disorder. It's because they just made it up. Wait till next year. I mean, after all, the American Psychiatric Association is now legitimately considering pedophilia as a sexual orientation as opposed to a deviant behavior or a punishable crime. The families of those killed and hurt in the crash have filed 5 separate civil lawsuits seeking damages against Couch, including the family of one of his passengers who was paralyzed in the crash. So, bottom line here is, prosecutors are still going after this kid, and rightfully so. The guy's walked, and for no good reason. Should not have been allowed. And I, for one, I have not yet signed the petition for the recall of the judge, but I will be, and I would highly recommend anybody else out there that has even an inkling of what real justice should be and how our judicial system should be working, judges following the law, seeking justice, and not being activists, or in this case, the possibility is certainly there that, I hate to say it, but there's a lot of money in the hands of the family that can possibly suffer from affluenza. At any rate, that's it. The beat goes on, and this story continues. We will continue to talk about it. Also, other follow-up story, real quick. If you haven't already heard, Congress has now currently passed this bipartisan budget deal. So, congratulations. If this actually gets signed, and everybody's expecting that the man-child on high, Mr. Barack Hussein Obama, the occupier, as I like to call him, will most likely sign it. So if that's the case, for the first time since Obama's been in office, we will have a budget. It's a crappy budget. It's a crappy deal. But guess what? For those of you that are doing the current little victory lap, hold your horses. Maybe just a little premature, because as lawmakers are heading back to their districts, fresh off passing this budget deal to fund the government for the next 2 years, the Senate vote that happened just this afternoon was, of course, just a formality. We knew the democratically controlled Senate was going to pass it. However, the prospects of the political paralysis and even another government shutdown, they haven't gone away yet, boys and girls. The next deadline, in fact, is just right around the corner. By January 15th, appropriators from the House and Senate will have to figure out how to turn that new budget framework into mutually agreed upon funding levels for 12 separate spending bills, one for each of the appropriations subcommittees. Now, that particular task will be nearly as flashy as the one they just finished, but aides on the Hill and observers off it caution that the task could be harder. Quote, "This is where the winners and losers will come from." This according to one Democratic aide who works on the appropriations process. How many times have you heard we should be budgeting with a scalpel and not a meat cleaver? This is about to be the reality of the scalpel. Now, confronting lawmakers is the delicate task of divvying up the benefits of sequester relief. After all, we are talking about the sequestration ending or nearly ending for a good many folks, but it's certainly not set as to who gets complete relief and who gets partial relief and who gets left out on the cold. And this has to be determined for the next fiscal year. And keep in mind that what's been agreed to by the House Budget Committee and the Senate Budget Committee, or at least the chairs thereof, Mr. Paul Ryan and Miss Claire Patty Murphy, there are a lot of open-ended issues. Now, in general, the spending the money is a much easier task than cutting it. That happens in everybody's budget. But in this particular case, lawmakers aren't exactly flush with the cash to throw at the agencies. If anything, they're like firefighters trying to figure out which homes on a burning block are the most desperate need of help. Translation, they've got to figure out who they really have to try to make happy. And in fiscal year 2013, sequestration cuts roughly $85 billion from non-mandatory spending accounts, driving many government entities to exhaust emergency funds. use administrative gimmicks, and make painful cuts. The only thing painful about this is hearing these politicians moan and whine and cry. Because the truth of the matter is, if they used up their emergency funds, it's because they were so busy trying to maintain unsustainable cash levels. Did they honestly think there would be no limit, or that eventually they'd get this money back? Of course they did. That's exactly what they thought. And guess what? According to this budget deal and whatever's going to happen to help mend the fences to make this thing happen, most likely they will get back everything they want. Now, they're complaining about having to make cuts. The first instant, the first minute, the first second that there was a budgetary issue, there should already be cuts going on. There should be no administrative gimmicks. There should be no exhausting of emergency funds. There should be cuts made immediately. If you have to use some of the emergency funds while you're in the process of making those cuts, fine, so be it. But that's the extent of it. Over the year, defense spending was brought down from $552 billion to $518 billion, while non-defense discretionary spending was brought down from $490 billion to $471 billion. That's really a lot of money. But given the overall size of this budget and the overall deficits that are currently running, that's not enough. And what have they done? They've eased the sequestration. They're spending more money. And how are they making up for it? Now, part of it is in this new tax, and that is what it is. They're calling it a fee that's going to hit the airlines, again making traveling across the country more difficult for those of us who might want to travel but are limited on our fundage. Another big hit is going to the cost of living adjustments to the pensions of our military veterans. Now let me explain something to you, ladies and gentlemen. The effort to steal this money from our veterans, it's a bellwether. It's a dry run. It is a take the shot and see what happens. See how much pushback we get. Because who has more public support as an individual group in the United States than our veterans? There's not many. I can't think of any right offhand. There may be. But I can't think of a individual group of people that has more support. Certainly not very many groups of people that get support from both sides of the political spectrum, at least to some degree. The average everyday American typically supports our veterans because, to various degrees, we appreciate what they've done for us. But if the American people are willing to sit back and let this happen to our veterans without major pushback, then we're giving them the green light to come after everybody else's retirement plans. And a couple of years ago, a few congressmen floated the idea, brought legislation into subcommittees that never left the committees, at least not at that point in time, but they haven't went away either, that would legitimize and legalize the federal government's ability to seize anyone's bank account, much like what we saw in Europe during the attempts for bailouts, much like we saw in Venezuela following the Hugo Chavez playbook, because, I still think Hugo Chavez tends to be one of Barack Hussein Obama's heroes. Chavez may have passed on now, but his legacy lives on. if we don't stand up for our veterans on this issue and push for this travesty to be reversed, then it won't be just the veterans. The rest of us will face a consequence as well. Now, in accounting terms, this budget deal includes roughly $44.76 billion in sequestration relief, which is supposed to be split evenly between defense and non-defense. In practical terms, the relief was far smaller. Defense spending will only be $2 billion more in 2014 than it was in 2013. $520 billion compared to the $518 billion. The non-defense spending will be $21 billion more. In other words, the pie is not as large as publicly perceived. And there are a lot of hungry groups looking for a slice. The amount of sequestration relief provided is modest, and so I think it will be challenging to add back funds and meet all the needs that are out there. And that a quote from Joel Friedman, Vice President for the Federal Fiscal Policy at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. He continued that the amount that got added back is just a portion. They sort of meet halfway. It doesn't get you all the way back or alleviate the first sequester hit. It will definitely be a challenge, and some programs will continue to be short-funded at the end of the process. Now, figuring out where the money should go and what money goes where will be the purview of the appropriation committees. Each one of these committees will have to make the decisions for each program that they operate and maintain. But the bottom line here is, if these 12 different spending bills and appropriations can't be brought together, and if all of the decisions can't be laid out in a fashion that gets these people on track, then this budget deal will be just as useless as the idea of having a federal budget under a presidency that has lasted into its sixth year, or almost into its sixth year now, where previously there has not been a budget at all. The continuing resolution has been an issue, and now this is a bad deal. And I'm telling you, if we don't push back and get something done about this attack on our veterans' pensions, while it may just be the veterans now, it will not end there. It may not happen overnight, but it's coming. They're testing the waters. This is the canary in the coal mine, folks. I'm telling you. Write it down. Mark my words. Do not doubt me on this one. At any rate, going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we're going to talk a little bit about Phil Robertson and what's happened with Duck Dynasty. Can't believe what this is going on. And another story that I really was hoping we could just ignore, but nobody will leave it alone. So we're going to talk about Santa Claus and what color he is. Yeah, we're going to talk about Santa Claus's skin tone when we get back. Merry Christmas, and stay with us. Tap Into the Truth. Check us out at tapintothetruth.com for our latest blog posts and for links to all of our past broadcasts. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and to follow us on Twitter. That's Tap Into the Truth, right here on Spreaker Radio. Yes, that's right. Tap Into the Truth. Thanks for staying with us. Glad that you're still listening. A little bit of housekeeping real quick. If you are looking for alternative ways to consume the show, looking for the podcast, you can currently find us on Stitcher.com. You can find us at TuneIn.com, and you can find us on iTunes. Just go to those services, search for Tap Into the Truth, T-A-P-P, Tap Into the Truth. Also, go ahead and check out the website. I am still asking for everyone to please go to tapintothetruth.com. Down near the bottom of the home page, there is a section where you can send us a message, and then a little bit below that, there's simply an email me button. Utilize either one. Would love for you guys to give me your ideas for the biggest stories that were either underreported or ignored by the media. And by biggest, I mean most important, most significant. I want to do a countdown show early in the next year, and I'm asking for your guys' help with that. Also, just FYI, in case you haven't heard yet, the bumper music that you hear now, playing a little bit more since it is Christmas and getting closer to Christmas time. Not exactly letting it be just bumper music, but from this point forward, I am using a service called Magnitude. Utilizing this, I pay a fee to them, and they work with independent artists, indie folks that are not on a major record label. But this service allows them to make sure that they're getting paid their royalties, so all the licensing and all that wonderful stuff is taken care of. It's squared away. They're getting their royalties. The service is legal. That makes it podcast safe. It means we're legal. It means there's no legal ramifications. It's not unlicensed material. And that makes it podcast safe. Woo-hoo. Now, while of course I'm focusing on Christmas music right now, you have an opportunity later on as we get into the new year to hear some of the stuff from these independent artists that I'll be handpicking for the bumper music. I hope you'll enjoy it. In the meanwhile, that's that. This is this. One last item real quick before we get into the two big stories of the day, and that is my friends over at LadyPatriots.com. They have taken over management of a social media website that's designed to be generally political in nature, people who consider themselves to be patriots, and that was patriotspace.com. Well, the Lady Patriots have taken over, and now it is ladypatriotspace.com. But like I keep telling you, you don't have to worry if you're not a lady, because they welcome gentlemen patriots and they welcome student patriots. The whole idea is if you are looking for a social media alternative to Facebook, they would love for you to go to ladypatriotspace.com and check them out, join, and become part of the community. You will be welcomed, I promise. Now, let's get to this Phil Robertson deal here. The news was breaking. A lot of folks were hearing it for the first time just before coming on air, but it's actually been out for a couple of hours now. A&E has indefinitely put Phil Robertson on hiatus for his, quote, anti-gay remarks. Now, the whole idea here is there's been this major pushback. If, for some reason, you've been living under a rock and you hadn't heard it, because this has been the talk of the day, duck-dynasty's patriarch, Phil Robertson, gave an interview with GQ magazine. Now, there's your first mistake, my friend. Don't go to the liberal media to give interviews, because First of all, they're going to bait you into something, and then they're going to stir it up. This is exactly what happened with Chick-fil-A. When their CEO was giving an interview, he never brought up the issue of gay, homosexual, the gay and lesbian, transgender, bi community. He didn't bring it up. The interviewer did because he knew what the reaction would be. Just like with this, there has been no qualms made about the strong Christian faith that this family exudes. It's not fake for them. They are Christian. They live by their principles. And when you live by the principles and when you look at true biblical teachings, it does say specifically that homosexual activity, especially between men, is a sin. So you should not be surprised when you're speaking to a Christian that, you know what, that's what they think. If you don't want to hear that from them, don't ask the question that takes to that point. Now, what they really didn't expect is the Robertsons in general are pretty straightforward and they're pretty open and they're going to be blatant about what they have to say. Now, as far as the extent of what Robertson said, some of it seems a little out there, and the problem is a lot of it's still being taken out of context. I mean, obviously, if you're a member of the gay, lesbian, bi, transgender community, you're not going to like any of what he had to say. And it's not going to matter if it's in context or out of context, but I promise you, it's not nearly as bad as how it's being portrayed, again, by certain folks. To give you an example, let's take a little look at how it's being reported at the Blaze, and then we'll take a little look at how it's being reported at the Huffington Post. Well, let's start with the Blaze. According to the article there, Phil Robertson, one of the stars of A&E's hit show, Duck Dynasty, really doesn't understand why a man would choose to lay with another man instead of a woman. Okay, no surprise there either. If you happen to be straight, why would you understand that? Question: does anybody have an answer? Truthfully, again, this is common sense, but if you're not looking for something in particular, if you're not trying to set him up, you don't take the interview to this place. This was a setup. And you, my friends in the gay, lesbian, bi, transgender community are again being used as a foot soldier to attack someone who has managed to have some level of success in the media that expresses Christian values. They're different than you, and now they're using you guys to attack them because you have righteous indignation. At any rate, I'll continue. Now, he said this, and in a brutally honest interview with GQ magazine for its January edition, Robertson opened up about his family of, quote, Bible thumpers, and why choosing a man's anus over a woman's vagina is not logical. Now, again, even here, they're taking parts of what he said instead of taking it in its entirety, not the actual words. You're going to have to wait until the January issue comes out, unless they release that part of the transcript ahead of time. They have not released all of it just yet. But at any rate, you put in your article that the Robertson family really believes strongly that if the human race loved each other and they loved God, we would just be better off. We ought to just be repentant, turn to God, and let's get on with it, and everything will turn around. Now, that's part of what Robertson told GQ. One thing is for sure. No one can say they don't know where the Robertsons stand on the issue of sin and immorality. He said we've gotten to a point in our society where everything is blurred on what's right and what's wrong, and that's how sin suddenly becomes fine. Start with homosexual behavior and just morph out from there. Bestiality, sleeping around with this woman and that woman and that woman and those men. Now, the TV star and entrepreneur went on to paraphrase part of the book of Corinthians. Don't be deceived. Neither the adulterers, the idolaters, the male prostitutes, or the homosexual offenders, the greedy, the drunkards, the slanderers, the swindlers, they won't inherit the kingdom of God. Don't deceive yourself. It's not right. Now, after making his case as to why he feels homosexuality is morally wrong, Robertson then went on to express his confusion about why a man would even desire a man when a woman has more to offer. And here comes the other quote. It seems like to me a vagina as a man would be more desirable than a man's anus. That's just me. I'm just thinking. There's more there. She's got more to offer. I mean, come on, dudes. You know what I'm saying. But hey, sin. It's not logical, my man. It's just not logical. Now, here and the earlier part is where the discussion is being twisted. Parts are being taken out of the conversation and other things are being added in its place, and it's really got some folks riled up. In fact, now let's take a look at how the Huffington Post is reporting it. Their headline reads, Duck-dynasty star Phil Robertson makes anti-gay remarks, says being gay is a sin. Oh, big surprise. Again, if you're talking to a true Bible-believing Christian, that is the teaching. But, some Christians choose to ignore that. In their article, as they're reporting on it, they say, not only does Duck Dynasty star Phil Robertson fail to understand what it's like to be gay, but he also thinks homosexuality is a sin comparable to bestiality. Now, he didn't say that precisely. There's a little twist. We already went over the quote. Now, he said when you blah, blah. See, I get so infuriated with this media twist. He says that when you allow a certain type of sexual deviancy to morph out even further, you get things like this. So is it comparable? No. But does it lead to a level of acceptance? Well, that's certainly what a lot of folks on the ultra-left side, the eugenicists, the, quote, humanists, they hope for, because this is part of their population control ideology. At any rate, their article continues that in a shocking new interview with GQ's Drew Magnery, Robinson, the 67-year-old patriarch of the Duck Commander Kingdom that earned his Louisiana family a fortune and a hit A&E series, opened up about modern immorality and the gay community. Now, he didn't go after the gay community. Nowhere in that he said, as a Christian, he doesn't believe that homosexuality is anything more than a sinful activity. Again, I'm going to ask you, what would you expect from a Christian? Really? You go fishing for this. He didn't just open up about it. They asked him about it. It was a setup. So don't get overly upset when the man's honest. A little thing called free speech, which, by the way, again, addressing my good friends in the gay, lesbian, bi, transgender community, without free speech, you guys would still have to be hiding in a closet. Do not think because you don't like what he had to say, you have the right to squash what he said. He's got the right to say it. You don't have to like it. You don't have to listen to it. Just move on. Oh, no, but that's not good enough, is it? But anyway, here, let me continue with the media spin. What they do, it seems like to me a vagina as a man would be more desirable than a man's anus. Okay, they got that part of the quote right. That's just me. I'm just thinking. There's more there. She's got more to offer. I mean, come on, dudes. Okay, now that's typical straight man thought. And when you're talking to an older man who no longer feels like he's got to worry about what folks have to say and what they think, he can be open. He can be honest. When you're talking to a straight man, would you expect him to say anything any different? Can you see where maybe this is getting blown up just a little out of proportion? Can you? Now, then here's the part that really bothers me. Okay, they got pushback, and now Robertson's supposed to be on indefinite hiatus. This is being reported, and I'm going to take this from The Hollywood Reporter, which I usually won't bother with them, except for the fact that, you know, they were one of the first to come out with this. And that is that the news now is coming out that after the reality star compared being gay to bestiality, which again is not exactly what happened, that he drew the ire from the LGBT groups, including GLAAD and the Human Rights Campaign. A&E has placed Duck Dynasty patriarch Phil Robertson on indefinite hiatus following the anti-gay remarks he made in his recent profile. Can you understand why he skipped the Barbara Walters interview at this point? He should have skipped the GQ interview too. Should have just went duck hunting. Quote, "We are extremely disappointed to have read Phil Robertson's comments in GQ, which are based on his own personal beliefs and are not reflected in his series, Duck Dynasty." This coming from a statement released from A&E today. "His personal views in no way reflect those of A&E or the A&E networks, who have always been strong supporters and champions of the LGBT community. The network has placed Phil under hiatus from filming indefinitely. The news comes after Robinson's compared homosexuality to bestiality." And you see, everywhere you look. And they go on to talking about how it's not logical. So, you know, the news is broke, and that's the deal. But what happened to freedom of speech? What happened to the ability to say what is on your mind, especially if somebody's going to ask you the question? This has been blown out of proportion, and A&E is trying to play to a base, because guess what? A&E, Bravo, and these other networks that used to mean one thing have really become a vestige of homosexual identity on television. They have been. And that's fine if that's the route they want to go. But guess what? Phil Robertson has the right to say these things. And if you ask him the question, expect an honest answer. He did not say anything here that you should not have expected a straight Christian man over the age of 60 to say. You don't have to like it. But I do not want to live in a country where he doesn't have the right to say it. Especially as long as I have the right to ignore it. Now, only about 3 minutes left, but we're going to talk about the Santa Claus thing, please. I've been hoping to be able to ignore it. I thought this would go away. Megyn Kelly was reacting to a story of about a week ago this lady had written a story, and she suggested that Santa should be depicted as a penguin because she was always made to feel bad as a child that Santa was always depicted as white, which is not the case. I have seen black Santas. I have seen Chinese Santas. I've seen Hispanic Santas. I've seen the depictions. Ultimately, this is a ridiculous topic. I mean, while Rome is burning, literally, our country is in dire straits, we need a distraction. So we're going to jump on the fact that one of the Fox News babes said that Santa is white. For the record, St. Nicholas was a Caucasian. St. Nicholas is who the fictional character Santa Claus was based on. So you could make a legitimate argument that the guy's white. But ultimately, Santa is the personification of the spirit of Christmas. So what difference does it make how you perceive Santa to be? If your heart's in the right place, you're not going to care what color Santa is. But again, just like my point with Mr. Robertson from Duck-Dynasty, you have the right to believe whatever you choose. As such, it's not at all uncommon for you to imagine Santa, or even Jesus, as being your own skin tone that helps you to relate. And there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't matter, and it certainly shouldn't. And the only time it does matter is if you're spending way too much time thinking about the color of people's skin. If you want to go out and be a race baiter, which is exactly what's been happening for all these folks that have jumped on Megyn Kelly about this, they were looking for an excuse. This was a tongue-in-cheek comment about a tongue-in-cheek story because the notion that Santa should be depicted as a penguin is absolutely ridiculous. Let's get back to talking about real issues, and let's, if we're going to talk about Santa, get into the Christmas spirit the way it ought to be. Because if you've got somebody representing the Christmas spirit, it doesn't matter what the skin tone is. What matters is what's on the inside, and that's that your heart's in the right place and you're given for the joy of giving. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm already running long. Thanks for staying with us tonight. We'll be back soon. Enjoy a little Christmas music on the way out. Good night, everybody.